Hello and welcome to the Haus College Sports Show. I am Joe. With me is Kyle, as always. Here to talk about college football as we get into rivalry week this week. We have a lot going on. I have the ranking show on a screen over on my right. I'm talking to Kyle here. There's a lot of good stuff going on. Kyle, how you doing?
Doing good. One more week before we get into the bowl season where half the season dies. So it's the last fun one, I think, before all the opt outs.
Oh, I love the bowl season. I love seeing all the freshmen come out of nowhere and start playing, and all these random dudes, and like Utah playing a running back a corner. I just think it's fun and stupid. Like, it's the dumbest thing ever, but I love it. Let's get right into it, though, Kyle. We have a decent amount to recap from last week because even though it was a quote-unquote down Saturday in college football, a lot seemingly happened. Started off with Georgia beating Kentucky by 10, 16-6. I was very unimpressed with Georgia as someone who cheers for Kentucky. The Kentucky offense didn't do anything all game until the fourth quarter. Georgia should have won this game by like 20-something points. They got the win. That's the most important thing. But Kentucky is not the same Kentucky team that they've been the last 2 or 3 years.
No, and after we watched Stetson Bennett just, ball all over Tennessee, I know the Kentucky defense is probably a little better than that, but just not a lot going on from them. And, I thought this one might be close if Georgia took their foot off the pedal, but it feels like Georgia never got their foot on the pedal. Kentucky played this one close. I thought they played well, just obviously not well enough to win, but no shame in a 10-point loss, especially, considering all the trouble they've been going through in recent weeks. So good showing by Kentucky.
Yeah, I'm encouraged by the young playmakers on Kentucky. That's about the one thing I can say. Moving forward, they'll have to obviously find a new quarterback and figure out the offense a little bit more. But defense has played well, and those young playmakers are something to watch in the SEC the next couple of years. We have another top 4 team, where this is kind of a theme. The top 5 teams really struggled this week. Ohio State beat Maryland 43-30. The final score was not as close as the game actually was. They needed a defensive touchdown on Maryland's last drive to kind of, get the margin of victory up a little bit much more in that. They are really injured at running back. Ohio State is. They had Mayan Williams was out for this game. Travion Henderson left the stadium in a walking boot. He really didn't have it in this game, and they put in Dallas Hayden, a 4th-string running back who ended up with 146 yards and 3 touchdowns. Again, staying alive for Ohio State, staying undefeated is the most important thing. Would have liked to see them as well as the other top 5 teams play well.
Yeah, how about Dallin Hayden? The truth from Memphis, man. He was down between Tennessee and Ohio State. Ohio State takes him. He gets buried on that depth chart and ends up having what needed to be a huge game to get the win. I thought Maryland played very well. Talia Tagovailoa had a great game. He's very streaky, in my opinion. This was one of his really good games, and it made it a really close one there. I love the coaching by Maryland's head coach, too, and I'm drawing a blank on his name, but they go for 2 there, late in the game when you need 2 scores, and I guess the analytics tell you to go ahead and do that, and it is what it is. And I didn't necessarily agree with it at first, but he ends up getting it, and what ends up happening is it swings it back to a 1-possession game. He gets the 2, forces Ohio State to go for 2. They end up getting the penalty, go for a PAT. Maryland ends up getting 2 more from that, and it turns into an entirely different game. And I thought that was really good coaching, and Maryland pretty much did everything they needed to put them into a spot to win that game. Just a little too much from the Buckeyes, but like you mentioned, the injuries are mounting up at running back for Ohio State. You got to kind of wonder what's going to happen next week, but we'll get to that one obviously in a little bit.
Absolutely. Mike Locksley is the head coach of Maryland, Kyle. He's done a really good job, and they got some playmakers. That's a team that I think their over-under was 5.5, and people were saying, yeah, that's probably be an over this year to kind of bet on because they have Talia, who's pretty good at times, as you said, and they got some good playmakers. So definitely a tougher team, even though the record doesn't really say it. Talia had some injury issues earlier in the season as well, so kind of the reason why they're 6-5. Next one up, Illinois goes into Ann Arbor and loses by 2 points. Michigan wins 19-17. They kicked a last-minute field goal to get the win here. There was questionable officiating in this game. Brett Bielema complained after the game. He chewed out the officials. He complained in the media after the game, saying they kind of got hosed on some calls. And Kyle, there's some validity to that. I mean, anyone who watched the game saw that they had a key 4th and 2. Michigan did. And they ran an offensive pick play where that one of the wide receivers just absolutely took out 2 Illinois defensive backs. And then the next play, Illinois gets called for defensive pass interference. I mean, if you're going to let them play, let them play. And that kind of really ruined him. It was a bad game by Michigan, but Illinois has played pretty well at times this year. So it's, again, for all these teams, staying alive is the most important thing. But would have liked to see you play better.
Yeah, I thought they were in a great position to win this game, and like you said, and that's been a theme over the last couple of weeks, if we're being totally honest, is just the poor officiating, deciding outcomes of games. I respect the hell out of Burt Bielema for calling out the refs here. It was a BS call, and then they end up getting hurt by it on the next drive, like you said, and it changes the outcome of the game. Michigan's still not really not really a passing offense going on. You know, they do get 200 yards, but it was a very inefficient passing offense. And I think you rely so much on Blake Corum, you wonder if they have enough going on offensively next week to stay with Ohio State. You know, that offense still is pretty good. It's just been the defensive issues, but we'll see. I mean, I'm very excited for that going into next week, but tough loss for Illinois for sure.
Yeah, hopefully this makes a movement where we start holding officials accountable in sports. We really don't do that. We don't have like reports on officials for after the game. We don't have these guys get suspended. I think I've seen one officiating staff be suspended for a week for a bad call. I forget what it was, but it's the only thing that kind of vaguely comes to mind. We need more of that. More of, hey, if you don't do your job well, you get fired, or hey, if you don't do your job well, we send you down a level, or something like that, where it's holding people accountable, because it cost Illinois this game, and I think it's, as you said, it's cost a lot of games for a lot of different teams.
And I'm not holding my breath for accountability. I think they like how this works.
Yeah, so a kind of a quick story here. I was listening to a podcast with Peter Schreggers on NFL Network, who's employed by the NFL, and they're like, he can say whatever he wants about anything, but if he says one word about the officials, they kind of talk to him like, hey, don't say that, because they have to make sure that the game is fair and that there's none of this is rigged. I get that they got to make sure none of it's rigged with all the money on the line, but I mean, if you can't hold your officials accountable or even criticize them, there might be bigger issues out there.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like a system that you can trust when you're not even allowed to criticize them.
Yeah. We'll see. That's my biggest thing. My biggest thing for sports in the future, for all sports, is to have more accountability with officials. I think it would just make things a lot better. They're paid well. They can handle it.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, TCU beats Baylor 29-28. TCU was only favored by 2.5 in this game. We both picked TCU, Kyle, but it came down to the wire. They needed a fire drill field goal at the last second to get the win. They ran a play with like 13 seconds left. The clock's running, so 13 seconds when the guy's down, they go run on the field, get the field goal off. They win the game 29-28, and I'm sitting here thinking, for Baylor, when this is happening, I'm like, if they just made a substitution, the ref has to hold the ball up. So why wouldn't you just wait to make your substitution and let the time run out? So that's just kind of maybe some gamesmanship that I was kind of thinking in my head. I'm a weirdo who thinks about that stuff. That they have to allow time for a defense to substitute. If they run a field goal unit out there, that's the same thing. So don't really know why that happened, but Baylor put up a good fight, kind of like we talked about. And TCU they're a team that just finds ways to win games. Team of destiny, if there is a team of destiny this year, it's TCU.
Yeah, I should have listened to Vegas on this one. They knew what was going on, but I agree with you. That final play call, I believe they ran it too. It wasn't even a pass to where you can stop the clock. They ran the ball, which I thought was very risky with no timeouts. And then, like you said, a little fire drill field goal that ends up waffling in, and it worked. But, I mean, maybe they just have all the luck of the football gods on their side. But that one made me nervous watching that. Baylor, not a bad team, probably one of the best 6-5 teams, I guess, right? But they had a good showing, just not enough at the end there, like you said. And Max Duggan had a great game. I mean, he was most of the offense. And one more for the TCU, and they're in, I guess. Yeah. Well, two more, I guess. They got to win the championship, too.
Yeah, since we're talking about Big 12 right now, I'll bring it up. Iowa State, last place team in the Big 12, beat Iowa earlier this year. Iowa's going to the Big 10 championship game, and Iowa State's not going bowling this year. That's how impressed. I mean, that's why we need to give TCU some credit. Yes, the top end teams in the Big 12 aren't great, but there's no easy game in that conference.
Yeah.
So good for them. TCU looking pretty good as we head into the rivalry week. A team that did not look so good, Tennessee. They lost 63-38. This was the game that their defense really broke. We've been waiting for it because their defense hasn't been great, but the offense has covered up for it. This is Spencer Rattler's like 2020 Oklahoma season right here. He comes out of nowhere, shows off all that arm talent he had, shows why people had him as a first overall pick, as a Heisman favorite last year, and 63 points on the board. That's going to win you a lot of games. They had a lot of injuries in this game too, and they still did this. Didn't have Marshawn Lloyd. Tennessee, they were losing this game handily when this happened. Hendon Hooker goes down with an injury. You hate to see that. Kyle, me and you both talked about how much we liked him before the season. Ended up paying off this year. He's been a Heisman contender. It's sad to see that happen to a guy who had a lot on the line with the Heisman and everything else going this year.
Yeah, and this is why I brought it up at the end of the podcast last week because I wasn't confident South Carolina could win, but I definitely thought it was on the table. I was not writing them off. Like I said, Williams-Brice at night is a whole different animal, and that place goes crazy. And this is a top 5 team coming in. They're undefeated, and well, not undefeated, but they're a close game with Georgia from being undefeated. Got their eyes on a playoff. Obviously, they win out. They probably get it unless TCU doesn't trip up. We'll see. But like you said, they make Spencer Rattler look like a Heisman candidate after all year just looking horrendous. He was leading the SEC in interceptions. And South Carolina just seemingly scoring at will. I mean, we knew the Tennessee defense was bad. We knew it was probably going to bite them in the ass eventually. But, I mean, not like this, 63 points. I mean, that is a blowout. That is just from a South Carolina offense that honestly all year has looked bad.
Yeah.
And like you said, they had injuries too, and they still just showed up. Like, absolutely showed up for this game. And then, like you said, the injury to Hendon Hooker makes things a little weird because, and I've said it all year, I think that the Tennessee success runs almost entirely through Hendon Hooker. Yes, they've got some great receivers, and Jabari Small's really good, but Hendon Hooker is the guy that he's just been making Heisman candidate throws this year and then doing it with his legs too when he needs to. He's just been kind of doing a little bit of everything for Tennessee. And now you don't have him. I mean, we can maybe bring it up for next week. I mean, not too much, but I mean, you almost got to be careful because that's a trap game now going to Vanderbilt. They've got 2 wins under their belt against SEC teams that fought Florida Florida fought Tennessee pretty well. Kentucky didn't. But, they take down Florida. They got some momentum on their backs, and they're fighting for bowl eligibility. This is by no means a walkthrough next week, and Tennessee's going to have to be careful.
All right, we don't have that game on our list of games to pick. Kyle, we'll do the same thing as last week. You had a 4 as a chance of an upset for South Carolina. I had a 2 out of 10. What are the chances for Vanderbilt, Tennessee?
Honestly, like probably still a 4, maybe even a 5. I mean, the Tennessee defense just doesn't do anything. And now you have to figure out this offense with Joe Milton. And Joe Milton did okay, but he's inefficient. I mean, we've seen that before. And we don't really know what we're going to get with them. So I don't know. It's a trap game for sure. I'd probably stick at like a 4 again.
I'll say it 2 still. I mean, that's just kind of a joke, so I did it last week. But they should have stuck with Mike Wright the whole year. Vanderbilt. I know we're gonna spend way too much time talking about Vanderbilt, who's probably not gonna make a bowl game on this, but they should have stuck with Mike Wright. He did so well earlier in the year, and then they benched him, and then they started losing, and finally go back to him, and he's winning. Like if you have a diet, like we talked about it, even in the first week, we said, hey, this is a good win when they beat Hawaii. Not that Hawaii's a good team, but you look like you have some life to the program. Mike Wright's running things the right way. You might be able to get to a bowl game. We literally said that. Like, it's going to be close, but we said we could maybe get to a bowl game. And if they would have started them the whole year, I think they would probably be in a bowl game by now.
I think that you have to go with the guy that has the wild card factor, which Mike Wright does. He does so much with his legs that he's a problem for defenses. I mean, and it takes me back to the JRP Matt Luke years at Ole Miss when we were losing, 6, 7, 8 games a year. We were still dogs in some of those games and still coming very, very close because you had the JRP factor of, well, he might just rip off an 80-yard run here. Who knows? Mm-hmm. So I think that it would have been, like you said, I think it would have been smartest to keep Mike Wright as the starting quarterback and give yourself a chance to maybe make one of these crazy plays and make one of these crazy wins happen, just like they've done the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, you can't really, if you're Alabama, you can put in one of their game managing quarterbacks like they used to all the time and win the whole thing. They've since gotten good quarterbacks in the last couple of years, so that's good. But you can do that. If you're Vanderbilt, you don't have the luxury of putting in a game managing quarterback and hoping that works out. Like, go get Mike Wright in the lineup. That would have paid off way, way more. The one thing I will say, too, about this upset, Kyle, maybe we shouldn't have been as surprised as we were, or maybe at least as I was. In the 2-4-7 composite, they are very close. In talent levels, the Tennessee and South Carolina are very, very close.
Yeah.
It's just just Hendon Hooker and that offense. Hendon Hooker, as you said, and the offensive scheme the offensive scheme is just great. So that's what's kind of doing it. It's not the defense. It's not the stars all around the field. It's kind of those two things. So maybe we should have been a little bit higher on that upset last week.
Hey, that's why I wanted to bring it up. I was kind of high, but South Carolina had disappointed me for most of the year, to be honest. But like you said, people forget South Carolina has been recruiting very well. They're still, I believe, top 20 in the composite. So, and Tennessee's not much higher. So
I think it's 20-19 or 20-18 or something like that. Yeah. And hopefully for South Carolina next year, look at like all this momentum going now. They should have beat Missouri early in the year, but they got Spencer Rattler going. Next year could be pretty good for them too. So that's a good sign moving forward for Beamer ball. Next game up, we have USC beating UCLA 48-45. It was a fun game. No defense was played the whole game. UCLA goes out to a 14-point lead in the first quarter. USC comes storming back. Caleb Williams has over 500 total yards, 2 touchdowns. He is now one of the Heisman frontrunners with Hooker going down and C.J. Stroud being there. Those are the 2 other guys you could maybe see. Blake Corum as well. Maybe Drake May. He's not really getting love as much as we talked about him last week, but those are the guys to kind of look at. Caleb Williams, if he wins out these next 2 games against Notre Dame Pac-12 championship, he could be winning the Heisman, and USC could be in the playoff.
Yeah, and I think the theme, we're going to get to it in the next game too. The theme of the Pac-12 this weekend was turnovers killed you. And DTR has 3 interceptions in this game. That hurts him a lot. We talked about the defense of USC not being able to stop the run, and I thought UCLA did a good job of exposing that. They averaged 5.5, get over 200 yards. But just too many turnovers. You let too much happen. And we talked about this too. Both of these defense are horrendous. And Caleb Williams is going to be able to, carve him up like he did. And I agree with you. He's got to be one of the top runners now. I've liked him all year. He's been near perfect. He has an interception in this one, but that's going to happen. And 470 yards, that gets the job done for sure. I thought that was a good showing by USC.
I did too. Defense still scares me. That's why I think they might lose these next couple of weeks. But Caleb Williams can cover up for that a lot. As much as we talked about Hendon Hooker covering up, that offense is talented. They were without Travis Dye, the Oregon transfer. He's out for the season, I believe. And they plug guys in, and Lincoln Riley's gotten some talent, and they're looking like they're ready to roll. So wouldn't be surprised if they. I mean, I'm not going to pick it. I'll be honest, but I wouldn't be surprised if they end up in the playoff. But just still a long way to go. Some tough tests, and I'm excited to watch their games. All right, we have Oregon over Utah. This game was in Eugene. Oregon wins 20-17. It was kind of like, honestly, it looked like Oregon had this one at hand. It was 17-3. Then all the way, and then Utah comes storming back in the third quarter. Then nothing really happens until the end of the game, and Oregon gets a field goal and they win. And it's one of these games that Bo Nix played okay. It wasn't a great Bo Nix, wasn't bad Bo Nix, which to me was very weird because he's usually one or the other. So that was nice to see. Yeah. So yeah, that Oregon wins and sets up a chance to be in the Pac-12 championship as they're 7-1 in the conference.
A bit of a defensive struggle, I guess, here. Not a lot of yards really by either team. And like you said, Bo Nix had a very average game. But that's enough to get the win. You have a bad Bo Nix here, you probably lose. I said last week I was taking Utah because I trust in Cam Rising, and boy, was that a mistake because he had his worst game of his career. And, I mean, I hate it for him, but that 100% is the reason they lost. I mean, there's just not a lot going on with him. Inefficient, turnovers, everything else. I mean, the offense can't really get much going, and that gives Oregon a chance to, put this one away and get that. Well, they get the field goal at the end, but kind of an ugly game all around. But, Oregon wins. That's what great teams do, and that's what they did here.
Absolutely. They got the chance to play in the Pac-12 championship game. There's some scenarios where they don't get in, but, they have a game at hand on Washington and Utah. They play Oregon State. It's a ranked matchup. It'll be a tough one. It'll be exciting to see what they do. We're going to pick that game a little bit later on. Georgia Tech beat North Carolina 21-17. North Carolina's playoff hopes, if there were any after how poorly they were ranked by the committee at 13th overall last week, they're gone because Georgia Tech was not the greatest football team this year. They've started off the season really bad, fired their head coach, Jeff Collins. And now since that point, they've won 4 games. I think they're 4-3. They're like an average football team, which is impressive given the injuries to quarterbacks like Jeff Sims, who's a really good player for them. Their last game is against Georgia, so I don't think they get bowl eligible. But Brent Key, the interim coach, you got to hire that man. I think he's got 4 wins out of the roster. Their only win was Western Carolina, and they were getting blown out by everyone. Ole Miss, Clemson, UCF was a 17-point game. Pretty bad.
Yeah, and some good wins. Technically 2 AP Top 25 wins. I know Pittsburgh's not there anymore, but at the time they were. Mm-hmm. But after singing all his praises all week, and we've been doing it for the last month, Drake May has an absolutely horrendous game, and I guess it was probably inevitable eventually. I mean, he is a freshman. But you do hate to see it. They were at home. They had everything in front of them, and then they end up losing to a team that's got an interim head coach. Mm-hmm. I'm impressed with Georgia Tech. They've been playing much harder, like you said, ever since the firing, and they've been in games. They've won games. It's been kind of nice to see. But like you said, I don't see bowl eligibility in their future. I don't think that's going to happen next week, but still a nice showing. It sucks for North Carolina. You're still going to, I believe they'll still get into the title game or championship game with Clemson and everything. So still that to look forward to, still that to play for. But yeah, this is a letdown here.
Yeah, it's still a good year for them. You're right. They have clinched up the ACC championship game. They're going to play Clemson in that one. Good year because I don't think we expected this. No one expected Drake May to be this good. So, um, good for them. Georgia Tech though, big win, and like I said, I think it's something to kind of consider keeping Key around next year if he's doing this well. And you think he can be the guy? I think he probably can be. If Jeff Collins wasn't the guy, he's already got as many, I think, FBS wins as Jeff Collins had in his 3 years there. So keep him around, see what happens. Kyle, we'll make this one quick for you, buddy. Arkansas beat Ole Miss 42-27. It was a blowout. I'm happy about it because Arkansas can push on my over 7 bet if they beat Missouri this week. I know you're not happy about it, but Rocket Sanders had a big game. He's my new favorite player after how much he ran on your defense. So,
well, we knew that coming in. That was the joke all year long. Is he going to go for 200 or 300 against us? I've long thought he's one of the best running backs in the SEC, and Ole Miss has struggled stopping the run all year. And it wasn't even like it was tricky plays or anything. I mean, he was just running up the middle and not getting touched. So a whole lot of that. Look, you can complain about the officiating in the first half, first quarter, whatever it is, but the officials didn't give up 42 points. Ole Miss defense did. I thought they looked unfocused. I thought they weren't ready. Couple touchdowns called back in the first quarter on questionable flags, maybe changes the game. But again, were you ever going to stop Rocket Sanders in the rush attack? I don't know. I find it hard to believe. It's a tough pill to swallow at Ole Miss, and especially with everything going on this week. A lot of question marks going on there. We'll talk about that, I guess, when we preview the next week's games. But yeah, not good by them. And Arkansas with a chance, go 7-5, somewhat salvage a disappointing year. We'll see.
Yeah, that oink doink's gonna haunt me, man, and KJ's injuries honestly throughout the year. But yeah, it just seemed like to me from the outside perspective, it just seemed like Ole Miss lost that game to Alabama. They lost their chance at maybe the playoff and maybe the SEC West, and they just all the wind went out of the sails in this game. They just weren't ready for it. All right, Navy beat UCF. We're going to bring that up because, first of all, UCF was flipping back and forth between quarterbacks. Second of all, this impacts the New Year's Six Bowls because now it is much more up in the air after they were ranked last week. Now it's between Cincinnati and Tulane this weekend, and then whoever gets in the American Championship likely going to be the New Year's Six team. Fresno State is definitely getting close to that as they are 7-4 right now. Might be 8-4, but I think it's going to stay in the American. Whoever out of these three teams, Kyle.
Agreed, and they had a really rough stretch, and they were doing so well in it. But you get Cincinnati and then Tulane, and then you get a hangover game this week, I guess. And I don't know what they were doing with the quarterbacks there. Maybe you have a little more information, but you don't use John Rice Plumlee the way you've used him all year. He only gets 2 touches. With his legs, and I don't know why suddenly you get away from that. That's his MO. It's how he works. And it's very confusing there. Maybe he believes Mikey Keene's the guy moving forward, so he's just switching that up. I don't know. It's just not a good showing by UCF, and Navy attempts 1 pass and wins the game. It's very questionable. I don't know. A weird little game. That's what Navy does, I guess. But very, very bad showing by UCF. Good for the Bearcats, though.
There you go. I know we talked about this before the season. I was like, why would you start John Rice Plumlee if you got Mikey Keene who played last year and he's kind of the future? That kind of seems suspect to me. But once you start the guy in your position for New Year's Six Bowl, you stick with that guy. I don't care if you picked either one. If they got you that point, just stick with it and stick with the offense. I know they had to go to Keene because of an injury before, but Plumlee has shown the ability to get wins for this team, and I think you got to stick with them for more than like a half in this game. I think I was watching during College Game Day, so it was kind of not the main thing I was watching all the time with the 2-degree weather in College Game Day in Montana, but definitely seemed curious to me. And again, Navy triple option teams are someone no one wants to play. And if you get a job at a school where you're just severely underfunded or something, go hire a triple option coach and just go 6-6 a lot of years because people will hate playing you, and it'll be fun for us to watch. All right, Bedlam, one of the last Bedlams ever because these two teams hate each other so much that they can't get on the same page to play each other every year once Oklahoma plays in the SEC. Oklahoma went up 28-0. Oklahoma State tried coming back. They scored 13 points. And, they did not come back successfully. So Oklahoma gets one of the last laughs in this rivalry. It's not something I don't think we saw this basically blowout coming until the last couple quarters where Oklahoma State was just trying to come back. But definitely weird. And as you mentioned before the show, Kyle, Oklahoma State, I mean, really dropping it after a solid start to the season.
Yeah, I was off of them a couple weeks ago. They'd let me down too many times. I took Oklahoma last week. I didn't trust this. And you mentioned too Dylan Gabriel being back and getting a little more healthy. I think that helps as well. But yeah, the offense jumps out. But Oklahoma State, Spencer Sanders, you can't be doing just turnover after turnover in the first half. You're never going to get off on the right foot. And they were never going to go down 28-0. You're still throwing interceptions. I don't think they really had a chance in this game. I don't know. Gundy's just never been able to beat Oklahoma. It's like a Mike Leach thing over at Washington State or Texas Tech, like wherever it is. Just never been able to beat the rival. And here it is again. Oklahoma's even in their worst year, maybe in the last 10, 20 years, whatever it is. Still, they can't beat them. So Oklahoma State, big fall from somewhere near the top, and now they're, 7-4, looking at 7-5 maybe. I mean, a very disappointing season there.
Yeah, you mentioned that. I think T. Boone Pickens, I was reading a couple of books about some of this stuff, and he almost fired Gundy several times because he can't beat Oklahoma, and that just drives him insane. And T. Boone Pickens, rest in peace, but that's what was driving him insane, is he could never beat Oklahoma. He could beat Texas sometimes. He could never beat the rival Oklahoma. So maybe he can before Oklahoma leaves the conference. We'll see a couple more years from now, but for now, Oklahoma has the last laugh. We'll see what happens in the next couple of years. Kyle, hand up on this one. I was high on NC State this year. It didn't end up working out. They're going to go back to being 7-5. All the 7-5 jokes about NC State can come back after such a good year last year. Louisville wins 25-10. They didn't even have Malik Cunningham. He was out for this game. The defense, I think, did a decent job considering the situation, considering the offense wasn't moving the ball. It's an offensive coordinator problem. It's a Devin Leary being injured problem. We've mentioned it several times on the show. Disappointing loss. Disappointing to go back to 7-5 after having so much talent returning. Hand up on that one. That's my bad. I jinxed it.
You did. You were very big on them. You were big on them last year. They showed a little more last year, honestly. And yeah, this has been a bad year. There's not much more to say about this. You shouldn't be losing to a Louisville team that doesn't even have Malik Cunningham. And it doesn't feel like NC State really even put much fight into the game. But bad offensively, really, from both sides, or maybe you want to say good defensively from both sides. But I think we've watched NC State long enough this year to know that, no, it's just bad offensively.
Yeah. Yeah. So hand up on that one. I'll always admit when I'm wrong. I love being wrong. That's what I love the sport. If you knew everything, it'd be kind of boring to watch. But that'll wrap up our recap of Week 12. We'll go to Week 13, rivalry week. Kyle, we're going to start it off on Thanksgiving night. It's a fun one. Just about every time you watch it, it might be Elijah Moore peeing on a goalpost or whatever, but it's always fun. We got the Egg Bowl, Mississippi State at Ole Miss, 7-4 Mississippi State at Ole Miss. Ole Miss favored by 2. Maybe some distractions there this week, Kyle. What are you thinking?
First things first, get this damn game off of Thanksgiving. I cannot stand this. Put it on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I don't care. Get it off Thanksgiving. I hate it on this day. But yeah, like you said, a lot of distractions going on. The Lane Kiffin stuff, I'm sure everyone knows. No one has a clue what is going on there. And personally, I think he maybe stays, but I don't think that was his choice. I think maybe he kind of messed it up last night. I don't know. We'll see. Allegedly, he had a meeting with the players today. He came in, he told them that, he hadn't accepted any other job. Those are all just rumors, blah, blah, blah. From what I have heard and seen from the players, the main ones do not believe that. They think it was a soft kind of not convincing, hey, we're good here, I'm staying. They seem to think that he's probably out the door. We saw the distractions last week against Arkansas, and then they just laid down and died, and it was awful. I don't see Ole Miss winning this game. I think Mississippi State wins. The only kind of silver lining good thing for Ole Miss going is, they're very bad against the run, and Mississippi State doesn't really run it, so they benefit from them being kind of one-dimensional there. It's also going to be very rainy. It doesn't look like it's going to be good weather that hurt Mississippi State last year in Starkville with some drop balls. And maybe Ole Miss can play to that, but I just feel like when you're not focused and you're not giving your players any kind of help there, I don't expect you to win the game. So I've got Mississippi State in this one.
Yeah, I got Ole Miss. I'm gonna be honest. I think both teams have kind of maybe underperformed for expectations. Not like in the whole year. Ole Miss has been there the whole year, but in key points this year, I think there might have been some wind taken out of the sails, but I really do like Ole Miss running game. I think that can set up so many things in this game, and I don't know. I'm going to go with them, the home team. get one last win for Lane Kiffin, maybe. We'll see what happens with that.
Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I've heard, as you, I just, more of an outside perspective, I've heard so many different things this whole coaching cycle already. I don't even know what to believe. And that's how it is on Twitter. Remember, last year we were already saying Lincoln Riley was at LSU, and then it ends up he goes to USC. No one truly knows until it's done,
Agreed.
All right, Friday, Tulane, Cincinnati. Again, this is going to be one that will decide maybe the AAC, who's going to be in the AAC championship, and also who's going to be in the New Year's Six Bowl.
Yeah, so I believe, if Tulane loses, well, whoever loses isn't in it, but whoever wins gets to host no matter what. They host UCF, assuming they win, correct?
I think that's the scenario, yes. And then Houston can also get in, I think, too.
Oh, okay. All right.
But they can't host.
But whoever wins, no matter what, gets to host. So that's something. I got the home team here. I think Nippert's going to be rocking. I think they're going to be ready to go. I think they'll take care of business against Tulane. And then next week we'll get to have the fun little conversation about can UC win it and go to the New Year's Six and everything. But I do like UC in this. It looked like they were playing Prater a little bit more last week, which I can't decide if I'm a fan of it or not, and I can't remember if we talked about it on here just on the outside or whatever, but, like, you did just mention against UCF and everything, like, you've been riding with your guy all year. Why would you switch him out? And I'm sort of the same belief there. The only issue I have with Bryant is the fact that he absolutely cannot connect downfield. He does not hit receivers 10 to 15 yards outside of that. He's good within that. He's fine. But he's not able to hit that deep ball or anything, and it's just been frustrating. At least with JRP, he'd been proving that he can win games for you, with his legs, and he was even doing well with his arm. So I can understand maybe a switch with the UC quarterback a little more. I still think they get the win, though. I think they're going to be rocking.
I'm going Tulane on the road. I think that defense is for real. They've shown they can beat good teams like Kansas State. Yes, they've had their bad games too. But yeah, it's kind of like you said. I'm not the biggest fan of Ben Bryant this year. I do think you should stick with them at this rate, but I'm not the biggest fan. I don't think this is a New Year's Six team. I do think Tulane might have some juice. They've had, it was like I won't say it was a fluke game against Southern Miss. They lost Southern Miss. They lost to UCF. I think both of those games are like understandable. Southern Miss less so, but I think Michael Pratt being healthy in this game and that defense is going to get the win. Could be wrong. I think this really is a coin flip game, and that's what's going to make it good. All right, NC State at UNC. This one is also on Friday, just like the Tulane-Cincinnati game. UNC favored by 6.5.
Yeah, Drake May can have the same game he had last week, and they'll still win, I think. I have no belief in NC State anymore. Their offense is just so abysmal, and I still think the North Carolina. I know they did not do well last week offensively, but I think even struggling, they'll still be able to beat NC State.
I think so too. Again, say hand up one last
hand
time.
Up.
Hand up. Drake May is awesome. I don't think the NC State will be able to score enough points. They're gonna their defense will have to pitch like basically a shutout against a guy who's a Heisman contender to get a win, and I just don't think it's gonna happen. So UNC is gonna win. Also on Friday, we have Florida at Florida State. Florida State up to 16 in the rankings, the CFP rankings. Florida State's favored by 9.5. This is just a fun game for me, I think, to pick because some of these rivalry games, like the Iron Bowl, to name one, is like 22-point spread. So this one is at least within 10. And, if Anthony Richardson plays well, maybe they can keep it close.
I like Florida State in there. I mentioned it last week, or maybe it was the week before or whatever, but I've really liked what Florida State has done this year. They had that little 3-game skid. And, at that point, they're 3-3, 4-3, whatever it is. And you kind of write them off a little bit, but they've absolutely taken care of business the last 4 weeks. They haven't even been in close games. They've just been blowing everybody out. I really like Jordan Travis. He's not going to, knock your socks off or anything, but he's very good with the ball. He takes care of it and everything. He's good with his legs. He's a fun quarterback to watch. He keeps your offense moving, and that's been proven as they've averaged nearly, 44 points the last 4 weeks, last month, I guess. So I really like Florida State in this one, and Florida, we didn't talk about it, but they just got beat by Vanderbilt, man. I don't really buy into them right now. I don't think fire Napier or anything by any means. I think you got to give him at least another year. I don't think you even fire him next year, but let him get his guys, and he's recruiting at a high level, which is great. But I just don't think this year is the year. I think Florida State gets this one, and they're going to have a shot for 10 wins, in my opinion.
I think so. And I guess it's probably not New Year's Six Bowl, but they're going to be close depending on what results happen this week, what happens in Conference Championship week. That's a hell of a year for Mike Norvell, especially They lost 3 games in the middle of their schedule. It was like a brutal. I think it was Wake Forest, NC State, Clemson back-to-back weeks in whatever order, and that's tough. I love that they have a rotation of running backs. I've said this year, Jordan Travis is exactly what I want in a third string quarterback on an NFL roster. Like he doesn't have the arm talent to be a starting quarterback, but he takes care of the football and he can use his legs. And you know what? A lot of times when a backup quarterback goes in the game, you see these guys who are like strong arm guys who just throw interceptions and then it just makes matters worse. You get someone like that in the game, I actually kind of like they kind of juice it up, maybe run around a little bit, maybe change it up. Taylor Heineke's in the league right now, former Old Dominion quarterback, and he just kind of runs around, makes plays. I think that's what Jordan Travis can be, except he protects the football even better than Taylor Heineke probably. So I'm with you on Jordan Travis. I think they're going to win. Big year for Florida State, Mike Norvell. Turnaround year for him too. I think a lot of people were calling for his job over the last couple of years, and maybe want to take that back. So
a terrible first 2 years, so this is a nice little turnaround for him.
Oh, absolutely. On to Saturday, we're going to talk about the game first, Kyle. We have number 3 Michigan, number 2 Ohio State. Ohio State favored by 7.5 at the Shoe. What do you got here?
That spread feels big. Just so many injuries on Ohio State. Like, I still think they win, but there's a lot of question marks, and a lot of people are under the belief that they need to have JSN back for this game, or they at least need to have, Mayan or who's the other one? Travion better. Like, they need them healthy. There's a lot of injuries going on here, and I don't know. I do think Ohio State can win. I think that Michigan offense is a little too one-dimensional, and you're going to need just a giant game from Blake Corum in order to get this win, and I don't know if it's going to be possible. And obviously, it's the Shoe. It's going to be hard to play and all that. Part of me thinks this might just be kind of an ugly game. We'll see, especially after the last week where we watched both those teams do. Granted, I think probably they were both looking forward to this game a little bit. But I do trust Ohio State and CJ Stroud to kind of get this one done and get back in the win column and get into the playoffs. So,
yeah, I'm going Ohio State as well. I'm going Michigan against the spread too. I think this is a game that's it's a rivalry game. It's usually close. I don't think either team has solidified themselves as being definitely better than the other one. I'm with you. I do wish that get JSN or Mayan Williams back. Trayvon Henderson I think is going to be good to go, but I guess if you can't, that's okay. I mean, Mayan Williams has been kind of the better running back this year, as much as it kind of is weird to say because Trayvon Henderson was such a big recruit. I'm with you, too. I don't think Corum's going to have a big day. He got banged up in that Illinois game, only had 1 carry in the second half, and we kind of saw what that offense did. They kind of struggled. So against Ohio State's defense with Jim Knowles, who's been good for most of the year and just kind of had a brain fart against Maryland, it seemed, I think they're going to win. I think it might be close, physical game, but Buckeyes win, and then Kyle, I guess we got to ask the question off of this one. Do you think the loser of this game gets into the college football playoff?
Are the rankings out yet?
They are. So LSU was 5, USC was 6, Alabama was 7.
LSU's most likely losing.
Yes.
To Georgia. I mean, I would assume. Which then means, do you think USC wins out?
I do not, personally.
You don't? Okay, because, I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, if USC wins out, who's USC's one loss? I mean, it's not a great one.
Wasn't it to Utah?
Yes. Yeah, we called that one. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to do it that way, technically Michigan's loss is better than USC's loss. But USC's played a lot harder schedule, in my opinion. Michigan just hasn't played anybody. So I think if Ohio State loses, I would keep them in. If Michigan loses, and again, it also kind of depends on the score, I guess. But if Michigan loses, they just didn't play anyone. I mean, and that's been my biggest mark on them all year is the fact that they had a high school out-of-conference schedule, and in the hardest in-conference they had, they did get Penn State at home, and they took care of business easily there. That's good and great and whatever. But there's really not been another challenge. I mean, Illinois is not even ranked anymore. So I would say if Michigan loses, unless it's a very close one, I would probably knock them out. If Ohio State loses, unless it's a blowout, I would keep them in. So
I'm with you on that. And there's going to be basically what's going to come down to is we all expect LSU to lose to Georgia. I mean, let's hope that happens. Maybe it doesn't. It creates more chaos, but I think they're going to lose to Georgia. It's going to set up one loss. We'll just say Michigan for the sake of this exercise because they haven't played the toughest schedule. One loss Michigan versus one loss USC versus one loss Clemson. If USC loses one of their top last 2 games, it leaves one loss Clemson versus one loss Michigan. I think Michigan gets in that case. I think Ohio State with one loss gets in that case, but it's still a lot up in the air too. TCU could lose a game too, but I don't know. I think that's kind of how I see it personally.
I also don't want a two-loss team in over either one of them. So my scenario of them dropping out is kind of contingent on USC winning out or maybe Clemson winning out.
Yeah.
But I just don't think a two-loss Alabama team deserves to be any over either one of them.
I hope they make that decision. If all the teams lose, like somehow USC has 2 losses and Clemson has 2 losses, I mean, I guess I can get behind Alabama over maybe Michigan if they lose, but I don't want to see that either. I don't think it's right. And Alabama really hasn't beat the best teams this year either, especially looking after
Who have they played?
Ole Miss's loss. I mean that's
No, I agree. I'm right there with you.
yeah.
Who have they played?
Yeah, I know. That's the tough part. So I think that's what's going to happen. But we could see more chaos too. We could see some conference championship upsets. We really haven't seen that in the playoff era where there's a lot of conference championship upsets. So maybe that'll happen too. Next team up, Kyle. This will just be quick for me. South Carolina, Clemson. What's the chances of another upset here? 1 out of 10.
So this one I'd probably go with like a 5 or 6, to be honest.
Yeah.
My biggest question, of course, is going to be the South Carolina defense. They arguably maintained the Tennessee defense last week, but they also had the benefit of having a big lead the entire time. So they had no pressure or whatever. They could just kind of play loose and not really have to be tight, worried about, if we give up a score, blah, blah, blah. No, they played well enough last week. But the Clemson offense has just been so bad. If Spencer Rattler, let's get this out of the way. If he plays the way he played last week, South Carolina is going to win. I'm going to assume he doesn't do that. But I do think that Carolina actually has their best chance against Clemson that they've had in the last maybe 5-10 years or whatever it is. I'm not convinced they do win. I'm still taking Clemson, but I think that 14.5 spread is a little optimistic, and I could see Clemson tripping up a little bit. But I will take Clemson.
I'm taking Clemson too. It's just that defense, a lot of talent on the defensive line. They did lose Xavier Thomas for the rest of the year, but they still have so many guys on that defensive line. The defense in general, I think that's the difference there. Will Shipley's still a really, really good running back. Has 960 yards this year with like the quarterback issues of not being able to be more of a threat. So I'll go Clemson. I'm with you though. Spencer Rattler plays that way. I mean, A, where was he the whole season? And B, yeah, they're going to win. So yeah, I'm going Clemson.
I love that he finally showed up at the very end of November.
Yeah. And now he's got me thinking he's gonna do kind of like he did at Oklahoma at the end of 2020, where he's gonna have people is South Carolina
believing in him again?
Is South Carolina top? I can't wait for the offseason. Is South Carolina top 10? And honestly, who knows if he plays like that? Yeah, they might be a top 10 team next year. I'm gonna be honest. That was one of the most incredible performances I've seen, even against a pretty shitty defense. So
I had them at 8-4 to start the year.
Oh,
I didn't. Yeah.
Close.
And it was because I thought Rattler would be better than he's been. He's been one of the worst quarterbacks in the SEC up until last week. So, God, if he had played like that all year, my 8-4 is probably coming up short, to be honest.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Kyle, we're going to skip the Iron Bowl this year because we both know where that's going.
Love it.
Yeah, let's just move on by. Let's go to Oregon at Oregon State. As I mentioned before, Oregon, if they win, they get the Pac-12 championship. If they lose, it could go to Washington, and I think Oregon State is still – or not Oregon State. Someone else is still in play too. Who is it? It's
not UCLA, right?
Utah still in play too, right?
Utah. Yeah.
6. Yeah, so if they lose, it could be any of those two teams. What do you think?
I've been big on the Oregon on the – what are they, Beavers? I've been big on the Beavs. I almost said Ducks. Jesus. I love Oregon State this year. They've been in a lot of close games. The losses have come, except for Utah, of course, on the road, but they're at home this time. I just don't know if I believe in them enough to take Oregon. Honestly, it's kind of a coin flip for me. I guess I can't say, I'm not taking a team. You know what? UCLA has let me down so much. I got to stick with one of my Pac-12 teams. I will take Oregon State in this one. Ooh. I know they're a little one-dimensional, but they're at home playing in that half a stadium. And I'm going to take the Beavs.
All right. They got that turnover chainsaw. If that comes out, you never know what could happen. So
look out. Hey, if Bo has a bad game, it's Oregon State all the way.
That's true.
And he's due for one. He is due for one.
I'm going to
wait. Start the season and finish the season as a bad Bo Nix. I'm calling it now.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go Oregon win. It's so weird. I've talked so much shit about Bo Nix, and now he's actually playing good for the majority of this year, and he's actually his NFL draft stock is even up. His Heisman odds went way up. I feel bad that I talk so much shit, but he deserved it. When he's bad,
Oh yes.
he's real bad. So I'm gonna get good active faith. I apologize, Bo Nix. Hand out. I'll pick you this week. You go to the Pac-12 championship, and then we'll go from there. Next one up, we have Iowa State at TCU. As mentioned, this is a last place Iowa State team, but again, this is a tough conference, and TCU has struggled with a lot of teams.
Well, you mentioned it earlier, and I know I've mentioned it throughout the season, and it's still held true. Iowa State loses these games by like one possession almost every single time. So they are right there in every single game. A couple plays go their way. This could be a totally different year for them. And so I don't think that the 4-7 schedule really tells the whole story. This feels sort of like the Baylor, where it's a 10-point spread this time for TCU. So not quite the same, but I wouldn't be surprised if Iowa State covers that. But I do think, ultimately, I do take TCU in this one. You got to finish up the business. You have the playoff right in front of you. I think they take care of business against Iowa State. Hopefully, they're not looking forward too much to the Big 12 championship game. That obviously could get in the way, but I do like the Horned Frogs in this one.
I do too. I think it might be closer than the spread there. Just kind of feeling like kind of what's happened to all Big 12 schedule for them is just very close games, and that's fine. But I think also what might help them is they don't have a locked-in opponent for the Big 12 championship yet. Like, it's probably Kansas State.
Sure.
But it's hard to look ahead if you don't know who you're playing. So, like, I don't know. I think they'll probably win. I think what happened this past weekend has helped them too. They could drop this game and theoretically still get in. It's not good to lose to what would be a 5-7 team at that rate. But I think the committee.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think the committee has to know. Like, I don't know. Like, that's not the typical 5-7 team. It is a 5-7 team, but I mean, we'll see. They'll still put Michigan in, so it doesn't matter.
I was gonna say, I still feel like they're disrespecting TCU, and if they trip up at all, they're out. I don't think they give them the benefit of the doubt and let them in.
If they're gonna pick a loss, you would have wanted to lose to Baylor because Baylor would look a little bit better. But yeah, I think they're probably out too. I wish that wasn't the case, but maybe we'll get some chaos going in the last couple of weeks. It really screws things up. All right, Kansas at Kansas State. Kansas State favored by 12. Kansas Bowl eligible. Kansas State with the win. Big 12 championship game would be there. Would be against the TCU Horned Frogs.
I got Kansas State. I'm not even going to really entertain the fact that Kansas can maybe win. I've loved Kansas State. I know you have too. We like what they can do. Deuce Vaughn and Adrian Martinez. I like the 12-point spread. I could see them covering that too. It's at home. It's at night. Big finish to a great year for them too. So I definitely like Kansas State in this one.
I do too. I'm big on Kansas State this year. Deuce Vaughn, Adrian Martinez. I really do like them. I think this is one where they could be struggle first half, could be looking ahead, but I think they settle down. They have playmakers all over the field with Deuce Vaughn, Malik Knowles. I think they'll be fine. And whether it's Adrian Martinez, Will Howard, they seem to be able to run the offense well. So I really don't care who plays quarterback as long as it's one of those two. Last game we're going to pick, the Apple Cup, Washington at Washington State. This one's at 10:30 Eastern on ESPN on Saturday. One of the latest games that will be out there that actually features teams with some of these implications. But Washington, if they win, in the Pac-12 championship game.
Pac-12 after dark, baby.
Yes, if they win and Oregon loses. Sorry.
I was gonna say. I don't think they're in if they win, but yeah, if Oregon loses, then yeah, got it. But they're gonna lose. Oregon State's gonna win. So.
Yeah.
I'm not buying Washington State still. It's been a fun little year for them and everything, but I don't think they've got enough to win. I love Penix in this. And I know it's on the road, but let's be honest, it's not a hard place to play. It's like 30,000 big in Pullman. Not very good. I like Washington in this one, and that's a hell of a year, 10-2. And like you said, then I guess before you go into this one whether or not you need to win to get in, but either way, that's a big year, and you set yourself up right there for maybe a New Year's Six bowl. So,
I'm going Washington too. I mentioned before the season Cam Ward for Washington State was a guy I was watching this year, and he's gotten better. He's doing okay, but I think Washington State still maybe next year might be the year. You think about the Pac-12 landscape. I mean, Penix is gone from Washington. Bo Nix is gone from Oregon. They could maybe make a move then, but right now Washington looks so good. Michael Penix looks good, and Caleb DeBoer knows how to coach, man. I mean, 9-2 in his first year at Washington after they've been kind of down. I know they got some guys back from injury, especially on that defense, but they've been down. So this is really good to be in a position where you might make the Pac-12 championship. I think they're going to be focused. I think they're going to be able to win. And Again, I picked Oregon to win, so they're out of the Pac-12 championship for me, but still a good year for them. All right, those are the picks for the week. Kyle, any final thoughts?
So we didn't pick Notre Dame USC. We skipped over
Oh
that
my God, I totally missed that. Thank God you caught the no. I had it on my list. I must have scrolled right past it on ESPN. I'm looking at like the matchups and everything. Yes, Notre Dame USC. Kyle, 18 versus 13, I believe. 15 versus 6 now. 15 versus 6. USC favored by 5.5.
I want to take Notre Dame, but I think USC gets this one. It being at home and everything, I think that helps a lot. It's a long way to go. I've loved Caleb Williams. I thought he's done a great job. I know we've talked about it, and it was a problem last week too. They are not good against the run, and that's what Notre Dame does best. So I think that definitely hurts them, but I trust Caleb Williams enough to be able to do a shot for shot if that's the case. And I do like USC to win this one.
I'm glad you brought it up because I'm picking Notre Dame. I mean that running game has been so good all year. They've got 3 running backs they can give it to. Drew Pine has been decently good at protecting the football now. That's been really good. They're not going to light up the scoreboard. They got Michael Mayer who can kind of be the security blanket. But I like him. I think they can run the ball in Southern Carolina. The latter.
Wrong USC.
The latter SC. I think they can run the ball in the latter SC, and I think they can win the game. This is like if USC is able to win these last 2 games and somehow make the playoff, they would have, I think, the worst rush defense or one of the worst rush defenses in college football playoff history. They're currently ranked 68th in FBS in rush defense. Yes, they're going to stack the box and try to make Notre Dame beat them with their arms, but I think at some point they're going to lose it. Whether it's this week or next week, they're probably going to lose because I think those stats matter. If you can't stop the run, especially as the time gets colder, I know this is in LA, but as times get colder, I think you got to stop the run. It's proven in the NFL, it's proven in college. I'll go Notre Dame. If it doesn't happen this week, I probably will pick against USC next week too.
And I agree with you. I wouldn't be surprised if USC does pull, or if Notre Dame does pull it off. They've been good and whatnot. But regardless of the outcome of the game, I do want to give kudos this week, of course, to Notre Dame. I mean, what a turnaround on the season. You lost the first 2, a very embarrassing loss to Marshall. You feel like you get it turned around with a big win against BYU, who ended up being terrible. So you can't even really hang your hat on that. The win against North Carolina, of course, but then you lose to Stanford, and it just feels like things are kind of falling apart. And now they've ripped off 5 in a row, and they've got a chance at 6. And That's a hell of a job. And Marcus Freeman's done a great job with this team.
Yeah, I think we can mention really quick. One of the things that's interesting about this is it doesn't usually happen that both parties get what they want when a coach leaves. But Brian Kelly's doing great at LSU already. They kind of needed more of organization at Orgeron's tenure, and that makes sense. And Notre Dame, they got Marcus Freeman, and Marcus Freeman's recruiting better than Brian Kelly. And yes, he's had some ups and downs in terms of in-game coaching. They lost 2 games they shouldn't have, but they've also won 2 games maybe they shouldn't have against North Carolina and Clemson. Like after the first start to the season, I mean, they played Ohio State tough too. I'm very impressed. He's definitely a guy I think that you could see at Notre Dame for a couple of years, 5-10 years, and see how it goes. And I don't know. I think it was a great hire. It kind of happened late, obviously, so they didn't really have many options at that point. And I'm with you. It's one of the best coaching jobs all season. He's not going to win Coach of the Year awards because it happened too late, but he's definitely like next year. You're kind of thinking about it. If they can find a quarterback, which they have a couple good quarterbacks the next couple of years recruiting classes, they could be a really good team again. Like, and I'm talking better than some of those Brian Kelly teams too.
Yeah, no, I agree. And speaking of both parties getting what they want after a coach leaves. Can't wait to talk next week.
Oh boy, Deion Sanders, new Ole Miss coach.
I don't want Deion.
Oh, you want
no,
Deion?
I will be happy with him. I'm not going to complain too much, but
he's not your top choice.
Probably not.
Okay.
We can get into it next week, but for the record, we will not be upset if Lane leaves. He has spoiled a lot of goodwill that he built up over the last 3 years in the last 24 to 48 hours. It has not been good on the Ole Miss side of this thing. And my temperature on the Ole Miss fan base right now is that a lot of them want him to just take the Auburn job and get out of here. Because, 1, this does not look good even if he does come back. But 2, we're just going to be doing this next year.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I don't know.
But if he comes back, you make a big fat buyout and you don't raise him much because he's kind of burnt some bridges anyway. So he doesn't have a choice.
I kind of feel like you're talking to yourself now out of it, but I'll appreciate it.
What? How so?
No, I just think you're like you said like, oh, I think it'll be okay. We're not gonna be too upset about it. I think you're just calming yourself down next week for when he leaves. I don't know.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, you've seen the stuff he's done.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes, and at this point, I think it would be healthiest for him to go.
Okay. Yeah. So you're right. Like the text you sent, toxic relationship, just end it, move on.
I mean, he's had every opportunity to make a commitment. I mean, you saw Dan Lanning do it. You saw Mark Stoops do it. You've seen coaches do it in the past. When your name comes up, you can either squash the rumors and get focused on the next game, or you can do what Lane's done the last week, which is nothing.
Yeah.
And I also don't like that he's now pissed off the locker room.
Yeah, that's the part that probably matters the most, honestly. I don't know. I'm gonna say I think Lane has probably maximized what Ole Miss can do as currently constructed. I know you mentioned they're going to get new facilities and that'll change things too. But for what is currently constructed, he's doing. Besides last week's loss, that was pretty bad. But otherwise, he's kind of doing New Year's Six bowls and everything is kind of what I think is what he should have done. He's best you could ever expect. But yeah, at some point, if you're going to entertain other offers, I do understand that sentiment that maybe you just leave. So. We'll see. It's going to be fun, coaching carousel, and it's all going to start right after that Egg Bowl because every coach wants their new job because the transfer portal is going to be the craziest that ever has been with NIL money, with the one-time transfer rule, with players getting extra COVID years. It's going to be the craziest offseason of all time. It'll be fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Now, any final thoughts, Kyle?
I gave you my final thought.
All right. Good. Sweet. Thanks everyone for listening. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube and wherever you're listening. Thanks everyone. We'll see you next week.